Welcome to Tipping Point. I'm Jimmy Evans. Today I have an end times expert joining me to talk about the technological explosion going on right now and how it is announcing the coming of Jesus. You realize that one of the most important signs of the end times from Daniel chapter 12 is an explosion of knowledge. That's what's happening right before our eyes right now. Is AI is literally changing the world around us and setting up the technological framework for the Antichrist kingdom. Today I have Britt Gillette joining me to talk about this and much more. He's been studying end-time prophecy for over 30 years and has written several books on the subject. His Substack site, End Time Bible Prophecy with Britt Gillette, explores today's news headlines and how they relate to end-time Bible prophecy through weekly articles and videos. He's here today to discuss his new book, Racing Toward Armageddon, Why Advanced Technology Signals the End Times. Britt, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, you've got a great site on Substack, and everyone, to tell everybody the name of your site on Substack.
Well, it's just brittgillette.substack.com. It's End Times Bible Prophecy with Britt Gillette, and that's what I talk about.
You talk about the end times just like we do, and so you've written this book called Racing Toward Armageddon, Why Advanced Technology Signals the End Times. It's a great book, and let's talk about this because you really start in your book by talking about Armageddon. I think it's the second chapter after the introduction, Armageddon and the end of the world. You see what's happening in Israel right now, Britt, this week that they released the living hostages, and they're in the process of releasing those that have been murdered and stuff. You see the whole world's attention is on Israel, just exactly the way that the Bible said it would happen. And we know that this is setting up for Armageddon. So talk about that.
Well, we know we see those signs that you talked about telling us the times in which we live. And Armageddon, that evokes certain images in people's minds. So we had the Hollywood version of Armageddon, then we had the biblical version of Armageddon. So Hollywood tells us Armageddon is anything that's cataclysmic and destruction of a global nature. So, for instance, they'll make movies about a comet that hits the globe and mass destruction, asteroids, nuclear war, things like that. The annihilation of humanity is what that's often associated with. But that's not what the Bible tells us Armageddon is. And so we read, the Bible tells us Armageddon is actually a battle. And so we read in the book of Revelation that the armies of the world gather together to do battle. And even the conventional wisdom, when I first started studying the Bible, people told me, well, that is the armies of the world are going to gather together to do battle, and they're about to destroy all of humanity. And then Jesus shows up and says, stop. Don't do that. And otherwise humanity would be destroyed. But when we look at what the Bible actually says, it has something different to say. So twice in the book of Revelation, the first one we read in Revelation 16:14, it tells us that those armies gathered together to do battle against the Lord and his anointed one. And we read in Revelation 19:19, it says, I saw the beast and the kings of the world and their armies gathered together to fight against the one sitting on the horse and his army. Wow. Well, that is Jesus Christ.
Wow.
And the saints that follow him at the second coming at the end of the tribulation. So the purpose here, I think the literal interpretation is that those armies gather together to do battle against Jesus Christ. But I think many people have sort of cast that aside because it sounds absurd. It is absurd.
Yeah.
But man's rebellion, the spiritual rebellion we've been in since the Garden of Eden, which should lead us to expect that.
Yes.
But I believe that spiritual rebellion is going to lead to a physical confrontation at the Battle of Armageddon. That's what all of this will culminate with. And advanced technology is going to help lead us to that moment.
Well, at the end of the millennium, Revelation 20 tells us the nations of the world try to kill Jesus. They try to overthrow him. Satan leads the rebellion after he's loosed from the pit. But there's a rebellion where they come against the camp of the saints. That's us. And right. Against Jesus. And so it's not, certainly what you're saying is true. They try to overcome Jesus, which is absurd, but that's the spirit of humanity today. You see that happening today.
Sure. No doubt about it.
Yeah. Talk about the Tower of Babel just a minute.
Okay. So the Tower of Babel was, we read about that account in Genesis chapter 11, and it's a historical event that describes exactly why we have different languages and different nations today. I also believe it's a prophecy of things to come, because when we look at what happened there, we had a world that was united in language and common purpose, and they set about to build this tower into the heavens as a monument to their own glory, to glorify themselves. And it tells us in Genesis 11 that the reason God did this was he said, while they have a common language and this united purpose, in time, nothing will be impossible for them. And again, what were they trying to do? They were trying to reach up into the heavens for their own glory. Right. Man's desire is the same as Satan's, to sit on God's throne high above the stars. And so I believe that was actually telling us, foreshadowing Armageddon and the Battle of Armageddon, this direct physical confrontation between fallen mankind and the Lord Jesus Christ.
Wow. And so, the book of Revelation is full of references to Babylon. In Revelation 17 and 18, the judgment on Babylon, the rebuilt Babylon. Some people think that's to physically, literally a rebuilt Babylon. What do you think about that?
Sure. I don't know if that's the case or not. I think it's probably either Babylon or Rome. I've heard different cases that are good cases for each of those things. I just don't know. So I don't take a position because it's not very clear to me. But in terms of man's rebellion and what that represents, it's very clear what we read in the book of Revelation about those things. So we know that this is coming, and we know that those prophecies will be fulfilled 100%.
100%. Everything's happening just the way the Bible said it would right now. So it's going to continue that way. So talk about God's overlooked prophecy.
Well, so God's overlooked prophecy, I believe, is that Tower of Babel prophecy. So that the people of the world, nothing will be impossible for them. And so we would see this literal physical confrontation that comes. We're seeing today. We're seeing this, and people openly discuss this. So we see in Silicon Valley, globalists all over, world leaders everywhere are talking about transhumanism. That's right. The dominant philosophy among them. Yeah. So this idea that human beings will merge with technology and become post-human or superhuman. And so, for instance, Ray Kurzweil is one of these transhumanists. He works at Google. He's an inventor, a technological forecaster. And he said in his book, The Singularity is Near, back in 2006, that humanity will reach this point in the singularity and go out into the universe and infuse the universe with our spirit.
There you go.
So we get this puts us at direct conflict with God, because in his mind, it isn't already. God is not there. Yeah. But he's going to find out otherwise, and all the other transhumanists are going to find out otherwise. So I believe this is exactly where we see this trajectory of where humanity is headed, what their desires are. And I believe, again, that Genesis 11 is a prophecy of what's to come, and it foreshadows the Battle of Armageddon.
Britt, when I came in the ministry 44 years ago, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have computers. We didn't have fax machines. We didn't have answering machines. It was just the dark ages. And you look at what technology has done just in the last 10 years. And now we have AI. And they're building these AI super centers all over the world right now. And if you just fast forward another 20 years, it's almost unimaginable what we would be able to accomplish, possibly our own self-destruction. But Genesis 11, and I've never thought about that as a prophecy, but you're exactly right. But what I have seen in Genesis 11 is God is saying, we are made in the image of God. We are going to marry Jesus Christ. We're the bride of Jesus Christ. So we're created at the highest possible order. And so God was speaking in Genesis 11 and just saying, hey, if I don't divide these people, nothing's going to be impossible. It's interesting, Britt, that now they have earphones that you can put in your ears. And I could be talking to you in English, you could be talking to me in French, and we could both hear each other in our own language. And so
Right.
the problem, the curse of Babylon, we're in the process of trying to get rid of that and become our own gods, really.
Right. Yeah, it is. It is reversing. And you mentioned AI, and AI gives the ability to do that too, even among different AI. I'm sure you saw there was a video several months ago about somebody had used AI to book a hotel, and the hotel booking agent was AI as well. And the two started talking to each other and then said, wouldn't this be more efficient if we used our own language? And they switched into another language and conversed with each other through that language. So, yes, we're seeing language barriers break down, and it goes beyond just being able to hear the translation. Those translations are occurring in your own tone, your own voice, your own inflection points. I mean, it is almost a near seamless, perfect translation in real time.
Wow.
And so we have seen that reversed. And once we have a one world government to go with that breakdown in language barriers, we will be back to where we were before God scattered the people and gave them different languages at the Tower of Babel. And he said, if that's not the case, then nothing will be impossible for them. So that's exactly where we're going.
So it's what's happening right now. Talk about Peter's prophecy.